All right, welcome to another episode of Corner Memoirs of the Service Industry. This week, we welcome a dear friend of mine, Sammy Espinoza. He is a renaissance man within our industry. The man has held almost every job I can think of. He's studied at Cordon Bleu. He has managed. He has bartended. He has served. He has run food. You name it. He's pretty much done it all. He's had a long career within in the service industry and has a very unique mindset within it. He's also a trendsetter, man. Like, I've known Sammy for years, and Sammy's always kind of had his finger on the pulse and has been one step ahead of everything. He and I kind of came downtown around the same time, right as the food scene and restaurant scene was starting to blow up in around 11 to 13. I mean, hell, man, he even married the wife and I. He was officiated our wedding. He's a fantastic guy, and the interviews a really good one, man. We talk about culture for most of it. Sammy is half Native American and half Mexican. We talk about how culture is important within the food scene, how hospitality is essentially like welcoming somebody in your home, and how culture is kind of goes hand in hand in that. So yeah, man, great listen. Again, thanks for all the feedback. If you guys are liking this, please just, leave a comment, give me a thumbs up. All that stuff helps the algorithm. But without me rambling any further, let's get into service, shall we? You're listening to Corner Memoirs of the Service Industry, a podcast set out to document the lives of those who work in service and hospitality. I'm Erica Chopo, and I'll be running the front of the house tonight. I'm a 22-year vet in the bar and restaurant scene and have worked and managed everything from Michelin star restaurants to dive bars and everything in between. I'm sitting down with members of our industry to talk about why they love doing what they do and share some stories along the way. Around every corner is a new story, a new hire, and a new experience. Cool. All right, let's get into it, buddy.
What is up?
Sammy, how are you, my friend?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, man.
Thanks for joining me. Folks, this is Sammy Espinoza, Renaissance man. I don't know. I
To
can't.
say the least.
Sammy is a good buddy of mine, as is all the guests. It seems to be. I haven't interviewed strangers yet. That's kind of my goal, is to start interviewing people I don't have an intimate personal relationship with. But Sammy is a longtime friend. We worked together at a couple places. You've been all over town. You've worked in Malibu at Michelin star restaurants. You've worked downtown. You've worked in, where is that? Frogtown, I guess, technically Salazar's Frogtown.
Yeah.
So yeah, man, welcome.
Thank you for having me, man. I'm
All right.
excited.
Yeah.
I'm good.
So, all right, let's, to kind of get a quick backstory, let's, give me the elevator pitch of your restaurant background.
I moved out to Hollywood LA in 1996. I had a friend of mine that worked at the Hard Rock Cafe and Universal, and I came out originally to do the acting thing just like everybody else did. I didn't really have that much experience in restaurants at all. I think I worked at a pizza place when I was 14.
Right.
But that's pretty much it. And I started out as a busser and then worked my way up to waiter, bartender, worked at Bar Marmont for many years, worked at tons of Hollywood bars, mostly as a bartender. And then I just started kind of getting really into it. I had worked with a chef I had worked with a chef. Can you see me?
I can see it, yeah.
Sorry, somebody was calling. This is live, ladies and gentlemen. I worked with a chef, Mark Gold, who was one of the chefs over for Patina Group at Cafe Pinot, and it was my first sort of taste of fine dining in downtown, and that was probably 2004, 2005, and it was the first time I ever like understood cuisine the way that he was making it, and I fell in love with it all over again, or for the first time. I wasn't really sure how that worked out. I just was like, wait a minute, you care about plating and you care about the product and you care how it looks, and you actually care about what it tastes like. This is like an actual art form.
Yeah, it's like that aha moment of like, food is so much more than...
It was blown. I was blown away because the way that he talked about food was like nobody I've ever worked with before. So then I was like, wait a minute, this is actually really beautiful.
Right.
So then I started reading about cuisine and learning about it. And I had been in the industry at this point for a good 10 years, 12 years or something. Anyhow, that became an interest of mine, and it started becoming I went from a hobby to becoming more of a serious thing. I decided to take a break from acting, went to culinary school, did that for 2 years, and I graduated and went straight to a Michelin star restaurant and started cooking with Chef Paul Shoemaker, who was the sous chef for Chef Michael Cimarusti, who is over at Providence. And I got my sort of fine dining training there, and from there I just kind of snowballed, and I became a manager, general manager, and then I moved to downtown, and that's where we are right now. I moved to downtown in about 2013. I was like, I need to get out of Malibu. This is not my jam. I couldn't do that clientele. It was just horrible, and it was traumatizing, and I had to leave. So I was like, I need to go back to live with, I think I worked for normal people who understand cuisine the way I do.
Yeah.
And downtown at the time was booming with restaurants, and it was just starting, and I wanted to get on that bandwagon. And
yeah. 2013 was like right at the peak it was right at the beginning of the peak of downtown. So it was like, you were right. You caught the wave. Yeah.
I caught the trend, and I always seem to be on the pulse of what's next in LA, especially as far as trends, cuisines, locations, neighborhoods, that kind of thing. I'm always got my ear out to see what the next thing is, mostly because I always want to be the guy that's like there first, and get a really good job and sort of be part of that trend, if not create the trend, if you will, for financial purposes and just my own ego, really. But, I have a culinary degree, so I feel like a privilege, I guess, when I do that, and I get to sort of be part of the whole groove of it all. But for context, in 2013, we kind of talked, it's booming, but specifically in food culture, is you had like Restaurant Row was up on 7th, and you had all these restaurants opening up, and then the Bank District started having like bar Baco Marquette was opened, and Bar Ama was opening, so all these the chefs were moving into town. Yeah,
it was these chef-driven concepts were all coming downtown, and it was kind of the place to be for food and beverage for
absolutely
a hot second.
I fell right on top of it. I moved into an area near Skid Row, which I absolutely loved. For some reason, I love the grit and the artistic like rawness. I feel like if I were to experience, the Lower East Side in 1984, that would have been my moment. And I wanted that moment, and it was happening. It was a thing. It was like awesome. And I saw an ad for Artisan House where I met you.
Yep.
And that's where our friendship just bloomed.
See, all right. So I little insight, like I'm with you, right? Like I was like, man, I look at those pictures of the Chelsea Hotel as a kid who went to art school and a former painter in a past life, a photographer in this one, like to be there with all those creative people in that scene. But I'm always like, that's like the polished like Disneyland version of what Chelsea Hotel is. The reality of it is I wouldn't have hacked it. Like sharing a bathroom with 30 people, like fuck that. I need a shower every day. I'm way too prissy to deal with that.
We're also Virgos, so we have to have our way of things that we need to have in order to survive in our life.
Certain creature comforts.
Yeah, I mean, the closest I got to the grit that I was dreaming about was living off of Skid Row and being in that environment. And I was actually very creative during that time, and it just made me that way. I don't know what it was, but the downtown scene, I just swallowed it up. I loved it. You know,
it was definitely like, that's the one thing I think that people are not familiar, and especially like recently, like there's my good friends at the Escondite got a little bit of press and have been getting shit on for the term Skid Rowkio. And it's like, that's literally where they are. They are at the intersection of Skid Row and Little Tokyo.
How is that? How did they get shit for that?
Well, because they can't have, they're a bar, right? And they can't operate as normal. So they've been really creative, and they have this big parking lot, and they've been putting, picnic tables and like beach lounge tables out and like make it look like a beach. And they made a comment, tagged it as Skid Row Beach. They're facing the skyline. They have one of the best views in town for the skyline. But there's tents on San Pedro. They're off San Pedro. And it's funny how all these, social justice warriors and all these quote unquote woke people just think of Skid Row as homelessness. And the reality of Skid Row is a neighborhood. If you go to Google Maps, it is a designated neighborhood. It's not like a nickname of a neighborhood. And it's a community of people who actually live there, as well as people who are down on their luck and are homeless. And there's a bunch of mental health issues and drug issues. And we have a whole episode on that. But Skid Row is a real community. And
there's people that actually want to live on Skid Row.
Yeah.
Like, I was
not like on the streets, but within those hotels, within those apartment complexes. But the point I'm trying to make is that in 2013, we had a real good harmonious relationship between the younger generation of, we weren't, and that's the thing, we weren't gentrifying in 2013.
No.
We were saving a neighborhood that was abandoned for decades. We were all in
decades. The same movement.
We're all working class kids. None of us really were all that wealthy. We're not like trust fund kids coming up. We are all working for a rent, and we're building a neighborhood, and had a nice relationship. What's happening now in downtown is more gentrification of kicking out the working class and bringing in all the rich yuppies and everything.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, we were like, we had arts district was still an arts district. There was still the toy factory was still in the toy. I mean, all the districts still had their kind of thing. There was a ton of galleries, still not a ton, but way more galleries now than there were or are now.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Way more galleries then than there are now. And
also the restaurants, restaurants that have popped up in the last 5 years. Like after I sort of scurried off to the outskirts of downtown, I started hearing that you were getting, chefs in from like Michelin star chefs were like moving in and looking for locations, changing up their concepts, whatever trend was like happening, 3 years ago, even like that was switching up as well. So it's like, I mean, talk about, change, especially downtown. It does have a sort of heartbeat as far as like trends go and what culture LA is spreading around. I mean, it's definitely born there.
And then, just for context too, like, you're now, you come to Artisan House, we're working together. I'm AGM at Artisan House. Brad is GM of Artisan House. You're my deli manager. And if you pop your arm up real fast for the folks watching at home, you're tatted like I am. Brad's tatted like we are. And we're running a $1 million, $2 million, establishment. Yeah. And I think that was something of the times was like, we're a little bit more rock and roll than the stuffiness of what we,
even though people would confuse us for hipsters, which is fine. I love a hipster, but I think that we categorize ourselves in a different category. Yeah. And that would be like not a hipster movement, more of a rock and roll thing. Absolutely. For sure. And I think, I mean, even the way we look, the trends in a restaurant is almost like protocol now for you to have tattoos. Yeah. Whereas 8 years ago, I would have to have hidden my tattoos to work at a fine dining restaurant. Now it's like celebrated. Yeah. I mean, if you just go look like the open kitchen thing, like doing away with chef coats and hats and now t-shirts and ball caps, like and that's like the best restaurant, one of the best restaurants in the country, Bestia. All those kids are in their 20s. They all look like skateboard homeless kids. Totally, what I mean? Like they're just this ragtag group of people. I love that. Yeah. It's always, chefs have always been the restaurant world has always been filled with misfits. Yeah. As far as I go back, my chefs have always been like prisoners or like ex-cons or, the kitchen guys have always had some sort of rap sheet of some sort, not to categorize every single person in the restaurant industry, but usually that's kind of where the family is created. And it becomes a career to a lot of these people. And I learned a lot from working in places where it's such a diverse group of people. You get people like me that have culinary degrees, and you have people that are just starting out, but somehow it all works symbiotically. Yeah. And that's where I think the trends start coming in with restaurants. especially, you know, like what happened in downtown. You're getting this whole movement of young people coming in and learning about food and redoing that whole thing with, like, you know, people were doing the craft stuff again. And I moved to Santa Barbara for 3 years. I opened a bar and a restaurant in Santa Barbara, and I was gone from 2007 to 2009. So 2 years, almost 3 years. And I came back and everybody had mustaches and everybody had like button-up shirts. And when I left 3 years prior, I had left serving cosmopolitans and like apple martinis, and there was no craft. I was you know, now the kids make fun of me. They're like, "Oh, you're old school. You're a 90s bartender, or a 2000s bartender." And I'm like, "Fuck you guys! Like, show me how to make a fucking, like, you know, gummy bear." A gummy bear martini, you know what I mean? Like,
that's how I cut my teeth.
Show you how to do it.
What was it? I guess 2007, 8. You know, I bartended here and there, but it was mainly like Jack and Cokes, that type of bartending, and totally. The occasional like kamikaze shot or whatever. But when I first started working, was you know, I drank 7 and 7, so it was so easy. It's just 7. You know, it's 2 ingredients.
Well, that's old school, yeah.
But when I first started really learning how to bartend, I was bar backing under a guy at a martini bar. It was Boulevard Lounge, which is now Hudson's, I guess. I always want to say Houston's or Hudson's. I always forget.
It's Santa Monica.
On Santa Monica. Oh. Yeah, with the big tree in the middle of the.
Oh yeah. Uh-huh.
So I went there and it was a martini bar. Like, we cranked out martinis like nonstop.
What year was this?
2007. You know?
Oh, okay.
And I actually was taught by, hand to God, now I'm making it up, the guy who taught me how to bartend properly, how to pour properly, like free pour, was John Murray, Bill Murray's older brother. Yeah. And he was just a bartender, dude. Like, he did movies. You know, his brother took him on trips and all that stuff. Like, the guy didn't have to want for anything. He just really enjoyed bartending, and he happened to be the bartender at this place. It was a trip too, because he looks like Bill and he sounds like Bill. But he's just like, he's like a distorted painting of Bill. Is like, not, he's got much like more slender. Yeah, he's got much more slender features than Bill does. Yeah. But it's a trip too, because like, and the thing is like, for those who don't know, the bar is on the inside, but the main part of the whole restaurant's a patio outdoors. Right. And around then you couldn't smoke inside, but you could smoke on the patio. And so John's just sitting to the left of the bar, smoking his cigarettes, yelling directions at me. Like, "Oh yeah, just gonna do like 3, you know, you're gonna do like 2 ounces of this." And like, he's just yelling at, you know, how to make drinks from while he's just sitting there smoking. Nah, he was awesome. He was a good guy.
That was your training?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, like, he showed me proper technique, how to free pour. He taught me a pour count. You know, this was, again, before craft, before, you know,
right.
Before all that. Like, craft was taken off in other places, just wasn't here yet. You know, it was still that club, you know, making Cosmos.
Yeah, that like New York, like Upper East Side type thing that was going on.
Yeah. I mean, I still think I make the best Cosmo ever. Like, but that's because I was cranking them out. Like,
I need to bring those back somehow. Those are amazing.
They're still good.
I feel like that trend's gonna come back. Speaking about trends, I feel like that whole 2000s vibe. All the kids are wearing those clothes again. Yeah. I mean, they're going back to like the 90s when I was in high school. I'm going like, how does H&M sell Tevas and like cargo shorts all at the same time? You know what I mean? Like, that was my uniform in high school. Like,
dude, if you ever want just a weep for fashion, just go into Urban Outfitters to the men's section. It's just, what are you trying to portray here? Because I don't get any of these clothes. Because they're not nice. There's just like, it's like a bad costume designer from a movie made in the 80s about the future. That's what it looks like.
That sucks. But yeah, I mean, you know, having grown up basically in LA and seeing, you know, me at 44 now and seeing what I've done in the last 24 years here in LA, it's like, it's a complete metamorphosis, and it just keeps evolving and evolving and evolving and evolving. And it's just like, if you know, at the age that I'm at now, you're probably, I don't know how you're feeling about the service industry and age. I feel like I am getting aged out a little bit. Yeah. So with the trends and everything else and my passion for the industry and everything else that I'm doing in my life, like I'm in this point right now, especially in COVID, where I'm like trying to figure out what my next step is. Am I going to stay in food? Am I going to stay in food and do something else? Am I going to like just leave it all together? I mean, you know, I'm kind of in the process of working with a producer and trying to get into food TV.
Yeah.
And you know, Chip, I don't know, you remember Chip. He is a food producer for Food Network and other networks. And he's kind of been like bringing me under his wing. And that's my next transition with food, I think. And that's kind of where I want to go, because I want to take my knowledge and my culinary degree and be able to like make some money.
Yeah.
And like,
I'll tell you right now, like YouTube's hot for that. Like these food channels that are
Amazon,
on there.
I mean, it's crazy right now.
You know, there's a guy that's been doing it for only 2 years, and he's up there with some of the bigger ones. You know, I mean, you know, Binging with Babish is probably
channel?
What?
A YouTube channel?
Yeah, so there's a couple. There's about like 4 or 5 YouTube cooking guys I've been following for years. They're, you know, they aren't like, one guy, you know, owns a couple restaurants in San Diego, but it's just kind of like a father making videos with his sons. Another guy was you know, cooked at a fine dining restaurant who went off and did his own thing. Another guy's not even a properly trained guy, just making recipes online.
He just probably has a great personality.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, it's right now, it's not that I think you're catching a trend because you have these guys who've done the hard work for you already for the past 3-4 years of doing it. And now that it's a thing that people look for, and they, you know, they look, you know, to, they looked for that. It's like the new cooking book, right? You go online, you see how to make something and you make it.
That's how I do it. I mean, if I want to learn how to make something, I no longer have to go to a cookbook. I literally will type in green enchiladas and there's 100 recipes and I could choose my favorite one and do it. That's how I do it now, you know, and having been doing, you know, restaurant traditional style, it's a good point that you're bringing up as far as trend, is that I'm trying to take what I know and put it to the test and really take it to the next. Where else can I do? I've already opened restaurants. I've owned restaurants. I've done everything. I've been a GM. I've been an investor. I've been a waiter. I mean, you name it. I've done everything in the restaurant business. I think the next natural level would be to sort of bring it into a bigger forum and have more eyes on the craft of restauranting, cocktails, you know, what have you, and either create content or have my own like personal like channel, which is something that I'm also developing with my Instagram at Urban Res Society, if you choose to follow me. But it's geared towards Native American culture, Mexicans, Browns. Yep. It's very niche, but it's something that I feel like if I'm going to take this knowledge to the next level, I want to make it really, really focused and bring it into a community that I'm a part of, as far as, you know, being a brown person in this time and being able to present that to a wider scale of people and eyeballs. Bringing a show with a person of color and putting it on, you know, Amazon or YouTube or the Food Network even, it's time. It's time. It's a perfect time to do that. Yeah. And I want to be a part of that. I want to make that happen. So I'm like super, super driven on getting these projects done, because it's not only something that I know very well, but it's also a passion thing as well. Yeah. And also, you know, I like to see things be created, and I want to be able to see that happen. And if I had anything to do with it, as far as trends go, this would be my next one. And that would be my next like goal.
I mean, you and I have talked about a lot about, you know, Native culture and the influences it has on you as who you are, obviously, as a person. But like, I think that the mass majority of people aren't aware of how much influence Native culture. I mean, you know, we've co-opted that for, you know, a century, and with costumes and all that shit. Now at least that's being brought to light of like how like uncool that is to fucking, you know, wear a headdress to Coachella. Like that's just a stupid thing to do. But like it's some of the conversations you and I've had of the direct influence Native culture has, and the melding between that and Latin culture, or at least, you know, Southern here Latin culture. So I think that's a really great perspective, and
I mean, I agree with you on that. I have, as I grew up and as I'm identifying myself more, especially being the age that I'm at and experiences that I've had, and being of two cultures, they're actually not very different.
Mhm.
And the last couple of years, I've sort of been like just bringing those two cultures in and calling myself Native American, still celebrating my Mexican side and celebrating my Native side, but really being able to like decolonize that name
Yeah.
and just like make it native, because whether you're in the tip of Chile or in the top of Canada, you're in native country wherever you're from. If you're native, you're native. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't matter. I didn't come here on a boat and either side. You know what I mean?
And it's the bullshit notion of like you have the Aztecs and the Incas and the Mayans. They were natives, right?
Absolutely.
But
Absolutely.
but because, of geography and bullshit borders, we've turned those people different than Navajo and Cherokee.
Right.
But
It's
they're the same. The only thing that's different is their somewhat belief structures and their rituals and the regions of the country that they were living in. But they're all native. I mean, all Mexican and Native Americans, they're all have a same. They're all natives. They're all like this the same culture.
Imagine if there was no borders. Imagine if there wasn't colonization happening.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Imagine if there was no Spanish that came. It would still be. I often think about like what it would be like to write a movie about what if nobody ever came to these lands. Like how would it be ran now? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Very interesting. But with that said, it would still be one big continent of different tribes and different, like, depending on the weather, depending on their political, stance, or depending on what the hell's going on in their region. That's what it influenced their politics, their language, their food, their fashion, their clothing, just like we're living in now. And with the Mexican culture and the native culture, I'm fusing those together, and I'm finding something very beautiful in the balance and the harmony of knowing that in my head, that I could just rest easy, not having to stress out about these like two cultures. For me, it's all one culture to me, and I identify with both at the same time. Therefore I identify as a Native American, because I'm a native of the Americas, and I know that a lot of people that I've met on my journey feel the same way. Whether they're white or black, or whether they're Chinese or Korean or whatever, it's a melting pot that needs to sort of just become one now. You know what I mean? Like in my head, that it works for me. I don't know how it is for other people, but for me it works. And with that, and with my knowledge of like food and restaurants, beverage culture and whatnot, I want to be able to put that culture in the eyes of the people, and be able to sort of make a difference and teach and talk about history, talk about fashion, talk about food culture, cocktail culture, all of that. That's my goal. That's my sort of my next thing that I'm working on, is in creating that culture, and make it as big as I can. I would love to be on a network and show that off. So it's got to start with me. I got to turn the camera on and interview people and find these people. And I have a lot of people that are out there that are doing stuff, and that are in the food and beverage world, especially because that's my world. Yeah. That's my world, and it'll always be my world. I love it. Yeah.
And if you boil it down to just food, I mean, every culture has their own story and their own journey. And I feel like we live in a world where everything you have to have a preface before everything. So preface that everyone has their own personal journey, and I'm not trying to lump everything together. But when you talk about food, the similarities in food culture within, being Italian and Jewish, there are a lot of similarities between, Southern Italian cuisine right on the Mediterranean and Middle Eastern cuisine, which is Israeli cuisine. Same thing with obviously Northern Italy and Greece, because at the time everyone was sharing everything. So especially with Latin cultures and Native American cultures, how much that does influence American, food scene is huge.
Check this out. So I was in Mexico 2 weeks ago now. I was there for 20 days.
Yep.
And when I used to go there as a kid to visit family and whatnot in Michoacan, and there was this tamale that they used to make that I loved so much, and I could never find it anywhere else. And as I got older, I was like, what is that thing? I asked my grandmother, who's 101, I asked her, I said, what is that tamale that we used to eat as kids? You put cream on it. You could put sauce on it, or you could put honey on it. You could eat, it's like neutral flavors. And she goes, oh, that's a nuchepo. And I was like, what's a nuchepo? She goes, it's a tamale. It's made of corn. And I was like, but it doesn't taste like it.
Right.
And she was like, well, that's our kind of our culture. It's really staple to our region. So I thought. Mm-hmm. So I started doing research on it, and I found a bunch of people that actually make them online. So I went to YouTube, and I was like, oh, this is great. It's a corn, just a fresh corn. You cut off all of the corn niblets, I guess, off of the corn,
yep.
And it just becomes like this pile of corn.
Yeah.
And then you blend it. You don't barely add any water to it. I think you're supposed to add a little cream or milk to it to get it soft, but you're supposed to get it into like a pancake batter consistency. Okay. You put it inside of the fresh green corn husks, yep. And you steam it just like a tamale. That's it. You can add sugar or salt. And I thought that was really incredible. I loved it. I nailed it. I made it, and my grandmother freaked out. She's like, you just made our family like favorite little dish. And I was like, that's so awesome. So I was really proud of it. So then the other day, I'm scrolling through TikTok, as I do when I'm not doing anything with my life, especially during COVID. And I get a lot of native TikTokers because that's kind of how my algorithm has been going. And I ran across this TikToker who is a Navajo, which I'm Navajo. And I was like, oh, what's he doing? He's cooking. How cool. And so he starts to cook, and he goes, today we're going to make blah, blah, blah. And sucks that I don't have the name of it with the way that it's traditionally called. But he starts to go into how it's prepared. And I'm like, wait a minute, this is the same fucking thing as their traditional dish. And it was the exact same thing.
Yeah.
I was blown away. They're like, this is a Navajo thing, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, what? This is crazy. It's the same fucking tamale.
Yeah.
The same process, everything. I was like, wow, that's incredible. And it kind of blew my mind because I thought that was only regional. That dish was regional, and it's not. I mean, it's literally corn. I get it.
Yeah.
But like the way that they prepared it, the process and the whole thing is the same exact thing. I was blown.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I mean, I think it was one of those things where like we tend not to think too deeply about stuff as people. So like one of my favorite, Mexican dishes is al pastor. Like if you have great al pastor, I will eat anything else you have on the menu. Like that's like my litmus test, right? It wasn't until I think maybe a few years ago watching some show on Netflix, probably like, Ugly Delicious or something like that. One of the shows when you realize that that's the reason why Mexico has al pastor is directly from Greek immigrants bringing. Oh yeah.
The
gyro.
The
yeah.
And everything. Yeah.
And it's like, you're like, oh, that makes when you hear it out loud, you're like, that makes all the sense in the world. Cause it's exactly the same. It's a big slab of meat, just like, a gyro is, but you don't think that that's, there was,
absolutely
Mediterranean, it was not even Greeks. It's Arabs. So it's these Arab immigrants moving to Mexico,
right?
Setting up shop and then changing the flavor profile to match the people that live.
Absolutely. I love that.
I
love stuff like that. And here we are eating it today, not knowing what where it comes from or anything like that, and people just enjoy food, but there's a history to food, and there's a story to food, and the reason why, for instance, like Native Americans, somebody asked me the other day, how come Native Americans are so overweight, and why are they so sick, and why are the natives so fat? Mm-hmm. And I'm like, well, for your information, Native Americans by nature's composition are supposed to be these lean, natural, organic beings in the sense that, living off the land was part of the culture. We don't have the enzyme to break milk down. We don't have the enzyme to break alcohol down. And there's problems with that. Tons of natives are lactose. Tons of natives have an alcohol problem because there's no enzyme to break any of that down. Yeah. We didn't have time to create that process in our DNA.
Yeah. For the same time, you guys were living off the land, and being really like, naturalistic. You had Europeans
drinking wine,
and liquor.
Yeah. And so then they bring it to the United States along with cows, palm trees, fruits,
Yeah.
you name it. When Native Americans were placed in reservations in the late 1800s, mid to late 1800s, they were permanently like taken off of their land, and they were no longer able to hunt where they were able to hunt, and where they grew up hunting and eating and gathering and whatnot. And they were given government rations, and which is where fry bread came from. Fry bread is a derivative of that government, disbursement of food. And you would get commodities. You would get flour, you'd get processed cheese, you would get canned pork, canned ham, canned chicken, canned beef, and eggs, powdered eggs, not even just fresh eggs. It was like powdered eggs. I mean, this box is sad. Yeah. I've seen it before. I've seen that in my lifetime. I was able to see what a commodity box looks like. And there's still commodities today. Mm-hmm. But you get all that processed meat and all that processed food, and you get a culture starting to make their food out of that diet, you're going to have problems. Yeah. And a lot of people a lot of Native people are going back to eating the way that they used to. And it's really making a difference in people's, Native people's culture again. They're almost reclaiming that tradition of eating off the land and seeing how it does make an impact and a change. And it's a quick one too. Yeah. I myself went am going like semi-vegetarian at this moment, because the older I get, the more I see that how food affects me. Mm-hmm. And so the way that I cook my stuff, the way that I talk to people about food, the way that my culture approaches food is, to me, a big deal, because food is health. And you can eat on the street all you want and drink as much alcohol as you want, but at the end of the day, you still have to be healthy, and you got to figure out how that works within your culture. You know what I mean? How did your ancestors eat? I mean, I don't even know what that diet is called. It's like paleo or something, probably.
Oh, probably. Yeah.
But I don't want to talk about diet. That's subject.
Paleo, I think, makes the most sense because it's like the caveman diet, right? It's like you can hunt it and you can kill it. I still think I still kind of call bullshit on the paleo diet, just in the sense that like they're like, oh, you can't make bread, and I go, maybe they didn't have loaves of bread, but they made bread-esque things. They had wheat. And it's just stupid. But yes, let's not talk about diets. Yeah.
But how do you make it good?
I think. Look, I think that's a great, launch point for what that you were trying to, the endeavor you're trying to do about, try and find as best you can some of these, old recipes, these old, hand-me-down stories of like, this is what we used to eat hundreds of years ago, and then try to find a way to modernize it, bring, culinary, point of view to these old recipes. I think that, I think that would go over like gangbusters. It gives people Absolutely. The history of the food, and at the same time, you're like, because I'm, this is funny that this is what you want to do. Because I last night living here in Southern California, we have a bit of an ant problem right now. It's summertime. They've all come in the house. It's just everywhere. I was the only one.
I walked in from being gone for 2 days, and I'm covered in ants right now.
Yeah. So ants are everywhere right now. And we track them to behind a bunch of, on our counter, we just have like a bunch of hot sauces and honey and stuff like that. And there was something spilled a while ago that we had no idea was there. And it damaged my father's cookbook. My dad, it's fine. It didn't ruin anything. It just, it messed it up a little bit. It's cosmetic. But my dad hand wrote a cookbook for all of his kids. So
what?
Me and my 4 other siblings, of his favorite recipes with like funny stories in it. And I've had it.
That's really cool.
I've had it since he's passed in 2009. And, I've cooked a couple things out of it, but I was just literally thinking the other night, I was like, all right, as this gets to going and I can afford some cameras and shit like that, like it'd be fun to just cook his cookbook as a show.
How big is it?
Then, it's a binder, about an inch, inch thick binder, but
2 seasons worth of dishes.
No, I probably have he has it all broken down between like, meats like beef and pork and veal and fish and soups and sauce. Like he has it all broken down pretty cool, but I'd say maybe there's 60 things in there. It's not a ton, but it'd be interesting because a lot of these are from old, like 70, like there's some recipes in here, dude, from like the Dom DeLuise cookbook that he just like straight copied. Like
Yeah. Yes, Dom.
So it'd be fun to have these like 1970s, 1980s. Some of them are family recipes, but a lot of them are just bullshit. Like, you know,
like how to make a bowl of
cooking.
Jello with like
not that,
like Frank's hot dogs.
Yeah, not that bad, but like there's definitely like definitely everything comes out of a can in his recipe book. So I kind of want to take it from, you know, my dad was an excellent cook, but by no means was he, you know, the most learned chef in the world. So it'd be kind of a cool idea to kind of take his recipe and then find a way to like everything I've learned over the past 20 something years in culinary and kind of, you know, modernize it a bit.
Redo the cookbook, but like the son's version, your version.
Yeah, like do his dish first, try it, figure out what's wrong with it.
That would be cool. That would be a cool actual show. You're onto something.
Yeah, we'll see. I need at least 2 cameras in it to pull that off.
Yeah, no, I mean the show that I'm developing right now for YouTube is definitely a produced show.
Yeah.
I was gonna just do it with my camera and just like and hang out with friends, but as it's evolving and as my focus is especially with Black Lives Matter movement that's been happening and COVID and everything else, is giving me time to sit down and think about what my message is, and how I want to portray that message and how I want to show the message. And it's turning into something that's a little bit more produced, a little bit more refined, and something that I think is cool in the sense that I'm able to present what these people in this time are doing. Good. I want to focus on cocktails. I want to focus on restauranting. I want to focus on cooking. I want to focus on home cooking. And then I want to take it to a different level of like designing and you know, consulting and, you know, politics even. I mean, everything that has to do with like trends and how we're as brown people living in this moment and be able to sort of bookmark that into this time and create this, not movement, but create this awareness that there are other people out there that that look like, you know, brown and that also have a voice. To see somebody brown on Food Network would be amazing. I'm not sure that there is one right now, but it's happening, and they
have Chef Aaron from like, you know, all the Gordon Ramsay shows and shit like that.
Oh yeah.
But he's like, I don't want to talk shit about anyone, but he's not what you're talking about at all. I know exactly what you're referring to, and he's so not that.
There's just a movement of kids that are so passionate about crafted culture. Yeah. Like you and I are. Well, something that you and I bonded on was that craft. And it was leather crafting. It was cooking. It was creating cocktails. It was making denim. It was that like home style movement that like I fell in love with when I moved back to LA. That was really, really happening. And it was like rediscovered by these young people. And when I being young, I mean like, you know, 25 to 35-year-olds who are now millennials, I guess. Yeah. And they sort of started discovering that, and they have created this almost empire based on that. That I think resonates with going back to the roots of where you are. Like, where is your name, you know, shoemaker? Because guess what? Your family were probably shoemakers, and they sort of rediscover that. And then they're cobblers all of a sudden, and they're making hats, or they're making shoes, or they're making, you know, whatever. And it's beautiful. I love it. Just trying to get away from the disposable world and into like the handmade, something that lasts forever. I mean, it's going back to denim real fast. The reason why you and I love denim is if you get the right pair of jeans, it will last you your whole life. Same thing, good pair of leather if you take care of them. There's something that I think we've missed being, you know, 80s and 90s kids of living in, you know, the Dixie Cup era of everything is disposal thrown away. And it was good. It's good to see the younger generation really latching on to that. That being said, it's a very large voice of people who are doing it, and they're mainly white people and mainly living out of the Pacific Northwest. And, you know, this like hipster culture type thing. I'd be really interested to see it from a different perspective of, you know, people from the reservations, like how they are,
there's got to be some crafting there just for survival alone, right? There's got to be that mentality bred into you about just, you don't have much, unfortunately don't have a lot of resources at your disposal. How do you get by? How are you innovative through, that process?
Well, I mean, I'm lucky enough to be able to have seen, especially my tribe, go from complete poverty to having some sort of wealth and some sort of seat at the table, if you will, financially, and having a voice and whatnot because of the casinos.
Yeah.
And my great uncle was the guy that started all that. So I come from this like lineage of like movers and shakers and like change makers. So I don't know if it's in my blood or what, but I was able to see that happen, and to be able to be effective. But my mom always says to me, she says, son, you need to learn how to go back to the old ways because we're probably going to be the last ones here. And whatever is going, and she's been telling me that for years. And I'm looking around her and I'm going, I need to learn how to grow vegetables. Like, I really need to figure that out and like master that. You know what I mean? And my brother is the head of our reservation's community garden. And he invited me today. I was just there this morning at the reservation, and he was like, come by and pick up some veggies. They're all organic. And I'm like, I gotta go, but next time, But that's his thing. And we're giving back to the kids. Our kids are like 5, 10, 15, 20-year-olds. We're giving them that lesson. And the Native communities, especially the ones that I'm involved with, I know elsewhere too, that part of the culture of the Native American community is to teach the younger ones the old ways, always preservation, storytelling, music, fashion, food, traditions, all of it, the 9 yards. From the day one, my nieces and nephews that are 2 years old have rattles in their hand, and they're learning how to sing traditional songs, and they grow up singing all these songs. That's our job, is to keep what little we have of our culture, keep it alive. We have this one dish, especially talking about food, that is made of acorn. It's an acorn pudding.
Oh, wow.
It is like so revered with our people because it's really hard to make. It takes forever. It takes a ton of hours to make, and you have to grind it down by hand, and it's this whole thing. I think it's beautiful. And it's only served at like weddings and stuff like that because it's really hard to make. But that's especially, for instance, one dish that in our culture we have, and we've preserved it. And we don't have a lot. The Spanish took a lot of our language and culture and whatnot away from us. So we try to scavenge and scrounge up as much information as we could as a people and try to put it together, and try to teach it language and everything that I had just listed. But for me, having an influence in like cuisine and restaurants and everything, it's definitely comes from my background in growing up in a Native environment. That's how we get together. I mean, I think I speak for a lot of cultures. Food and wine and beverage is the only way to bring peace and to bring love and to bring harmony into a family or tribe setting. And it's very big in our family, and it's normal. I know, I'm sure I speak the same way for Italians, it's the same way Hispanics and everybody else. Food is what brings people together. It's something that I always have held on my shoulders, and I always try to create that. And every time I go home, I make a new dish because my mom says, cook me something, and I don't use my culinary degree very often, but when I do, it's usually at my mom's house. But yeah, I definitely bring that into, and I want to keep doing it. I'm here to be an actor, and I'm doing everything I can to do that. But I'm not only here to do that. I'm here to be able to be the voice of a forgotten people, and the person that doesn't really get that much eyeball time. But I'm going to change that. I'm going to try and make that happen. And,
I mean, you have the good fortune of being fairly connected within the food and hospitality industry, and also entertainment industry with people like Chip, and who's that's what he does for a living. Use it, man. Use the platform that you have to tell the stories that people aren't getting a chance to tell. I think, you're right about the culture stuff about food. Like growing up, I had one rule, like, especially when you're in high school and middle school and you start to be rebellious and start to kind of move away from the family. There was always one rule. I don't care when you come home, just be home by dinner. That was it. Like, just be home by dinner. If you're not going to be home by dinner, you have to call and let us know. It was like, so I'd be out and about, like in my, real rebellious, freshman high school smoking pot all day type phases.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I'd leave school 2:30, go smoke pot with my friends, and I got to go. And they wanted to go continue going off and fuck off and do something else. I'm like, oh, I got to go home for dinner. I'd be high as shit at the dinner table. At least I was home. It was definitely.
That was the rule. They didn't say come over.
Yeah, right. I talked to my mom. She's like, "What? I had no idea." I go, "How the hell did you not know?" I freaked. I was like, me and my friends are sitting there just laughing. But yeah, no, it was always be home by dinner, and food is such a big part of the family unit in my life. And I know that was definitely my dad's doing, being a Italian American, his parents being, first generation. And, my mom's family is, obviously a large dinner table is part of their upbringing, but it was a different approach to it. There was dinner was more about conversation and more about discussing politics, and they were quizzed on math and like Scrabble shit all the time. My mom's, upbringing. So again, it's that sense of sharing stories and sharing and knowledge. And when you look at a culture that's getting to a point where like certain things are being forgotten with every generation's distractions, being able to find a way.
Especially when you're coming from an immigrant background, preserving that and not mixing it up with what's here already is hard to not fuse it together, and have that fusion thing. To be an individual is hard. Yeah.
I mean, I think one of my favorite things on YouTube, going back to YouTube food scene, is that these people, they're going around to small towns in Italy, in Sicily, and interviewing these old grandmas, these like 90-year-old grandmas, and having them cook, and this is a dying generation of knowledge that isn't getting passed down, and getting their recipes and getting their technique and how they do stuff, and documenting it for the world to see, because
that's awesome.
That's
so amazing.
It's so similar, like just the notion of flour, eggs, corn, flour, like this, the making of something with your hands. Tortillas are made with your hands, pasta's made with your hands.
Yeah.
All that stuff's similar. It's so funny. Like we can divide each other up with bullshit borders and rules and regs, but food's the common denominator. And
there's no difference between a flour tortilla and a naan at an Indian restaurant. Like, it's literally like
there's no difference between a tortellini and a dumpling. It's just it's the same thing. Yeah,
not at all. No, I think that definitely food is needs to be preserved. I follow a chef on social media. His name is Rich Francis. I believe he's from Canada. He's Native American, and his whole thing is Native cuisine. And if you guys ever are intrigued about Native cuisine, this guy's got it down. This guy cooks like he basically catches it, kills it, and cooks it.
Oh, great!
And he does. Why he doesn't have his own show, I have no idea. Maybe I'll chase him down and produce something for him, because I think he was on the Food Network in Canada for something. So he has some sort of fame because he's got a lot of followers and whatnot. But he's not even from this region. Yeah. But the way that he's cooking cuisine, the way that he's cooking is like mind blowing. He takes like elderberries and he goes into his environment and like creates, stinging nettles and this and a little bit of that, and then he catches a rabbit, and then he does this whole thing, and then right in front of your eyes he puts out this gorgeous dish that is just mind-blowing. He uses these techniques where he like cuts into like a mossy like marsh, and he cuts a hole out, and then he like fills the hole with like moss, and then lights it up, and then covers it up. Yeah. And it's like this moss cooked, like whatever. And I'm like, what? Like, that is so mind blowing. I know that I've seen like, pigs cooked in the ground and pits and stuff like that. But this is like a whole different, he grabs like oak branch or oak trees and he puts them in as kindle, and it gives it like a smoky flavor. And I'm like, God, that is so brilliant. Yeah. And this guy, whether these guys did that in the old days or not, maybe they did. the way that he's doing this type of cooking is native.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it's native. You can't
Yeah.
you can't deny that, and it's a movement for
Yeah.
sure. I mean, this guy is like onto something.
I've been seeing a lot of like open fire cooking, where you know a grill isn't open fire cooking; it's controlled fire. Like this is like,
Yeah.
you put a big fire pit together and you nail fish on a plank and you set it
Yes.
up in a certain way where it's just getting
I love
residual
that.
heat and smoke, and you're like throwing a Dutch oven in a bunch of coals and letting that just do its thing for God knows how long. Because there's no regulation in it. You're just kind of It's all by sense, it's all by feel, by smell.
These techniques, though, they don't seem to make it into the mainstream, whether because maybe the cooking technique is too high scale for a volumed restaurant. You know what I mean?
I mean, it's hard to do some of that live fire stuff in a restaurant due to rules and regulations. Like you just, I think a lot of this is you're seeing in pop-up scene. The one that I'm thinking of, I forget their name, but this white couple, again, Pacific Northwest is where they're based, but they have a lot of, I say that with jest, but in Pacific Northwest, you have a lot of really fresh fish coming down from Alaska and Canada. You have that nature, the woods. So you have this notion of camping and campfire cooking is definitely something that's been passed down for generations, regardless of your ethnicity or your culture. It's something that everyone in that region is familiar with. But they do pop-ups. So you go out to like the shore of some lake and they set up a bunch of fires everywhere and they cook a big meal for 30 people or something like that. That's really cool. They don't have a restaurant. That's the restaurant. They do these dinner.
I know parties. A lot of chef friends that I have, they're happier doing that because it's not so controlled in a restaurant environment. You're always dealing with like investors. You're always dealing with a certain type of neighborhood or certain specific clientele. What pop-up gives people a little bit more freedom to do whatever the hell that they want. Yeah. And also an opportunity to showcase their stuff. I love that culture. Yeah. I wish there was more of it.
That's what we talked about in some other, past episodes a little bit, like the lack of the pop-up. You remember, I think you went to at least one. Did you go to a Sushi Belly Tower, the Michael Sentner's? Yeah. So he still does that. I mean, with, his restaurant bar being in New York and not really being able to operate the same way, but he's cut his teeth traveling the country, doing these pop-up dinners, these, sushi dinners for people where he was, butchering a fish in front of people and making these, what seems very simple ingredients and heightening them with oils and sauces and making a visceral experience for people. He cut his teeth doing that. So when COVID hit, he just went back to doing that. It seems like online, just trying to find a way to give that experience to people in a, controlled environment. Well, I look forward, dude. I look forward to your show. I think, we've talked about it, like about this point of view you have about telling and sharing the stories of Native culture, and doing it in a way and telling stories that aren't being told. Cause there are some, but you have a very unique point of view and bringing it back to food now, which is new to me from today, like doing a food aspect show on that, I think is awesome, dude. I look forward to it. Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot to talk about. It hasn't been done. And I think if it has been done, it wasn't super successful. Mm-hmm. I think it was just the wrong timing, in my opinion, but I'm going to give it a go. I'm going to give it a shot. Sure. I figure taking what I know that you are probably up there, with me. I think, you've had so much experience and you have a brain filled with all this information. We need to do something with it. And the only natural next step would be to present your expertise to the world, and that's kind of where I'm at right now. If I'm going to leave COVID, I tell people, if I'm going to leave COVID doing anything, it's going to be next level shit. Like I can't, be at a restaurant just to be in a restaurant and be a waiter or be a chef or be a manager anymore. Yeah. Like I have to take it to the next level. It's time. I don't know what's going to happen with restaurants moving forward. The culture's changing. I mean, everything's changing. We're living in a very transitional time of our lives right now. We're lucky in some ways, but at the same time, it's scary because I don't know how restaurants are going to be moving forward. Yeah. And so I have to prepare, I have to prepare for the worst, maybe prepare
Yeah.
for the best. Who knows? But the idea is to get out of your norm and to do something. And I could proudly say, if I do something that's going to fulfill my soul of being able to, speak about my culture through food and beverage and the culture of and history and what have you, then I've left COVID transformed.
Smart. I love it.
You know what I mean?
I mean, so I guess we've kind of touched this, but I figured I haven't asked this in a minute to any guest. But I think, we talked in broad strokes, but let's narrow it down. What is hospitality to you? I mean, obviously there's family and there's storytelling also, but for you, how would you sum up like hospitality? Like what?
Hospitality to me is bringing somebody into your world, and it goes back to the origins of restaurants. People in England would travel from one town to the other in horse and carriages, and people would open their homes up and bring people into their environment and cook for them. Right. And the history of that will never change. It's been the same way from day one till now. And I strongly, strongly fell in love with the hospitality industry because of that purpose. I'm able to have people come to my culture for a moment, and from the minute they walk through that door, they're transported into this like experience that has to do with the hostess and the way that the way that they're greeted with the servers, the busboys that are attending to the tables, the way that the managers are floating around talking to everybody, making sure that they're having a great time, that making sure that those cocktails are just beautiful so the guests could go wow, making sure that that food is absolutely perfect so the guests could just have a memory with it. The music is playing, the lights are exactly how you want them, that everything's perfect. And I'm not talking Michelin star. You could be wearing a baseball cap and doing all this stuff. But the experience to being hospitable is you're coming into my home and you're giving the guests an experience that they'll never forget, hopefully. And so the art of that is my passion. I love that. And so to me, hospitality is being able to bring somebody into my world and giving them the best memory that I could possibly provide for them for that moment.
Awesome.
And that's from beginning to end, to the minute they get in their car and they leave. And I want them to say, I wish I was a fly on the wall when I'm in that car. And I want to hear, that was so amazing. That was the best food I've ever had. That was the best experience. Our waiter was amazing.
Yeah.
Blah, 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 blah. I mean, I love to hear all that. You know what I mean? Of course, you're going to get some hits and misses, especially now with the Yelp culture and all that. But that to me is hospitality. And I hope that doesn't change moving forward with COVID. I don't think it's gonna, but I don't know. Who knows?
Yeah. I couldn't agree with you more on a lot, quick touch on is like, I'm with you. I hope it doesn't change. I think some of it's going to have to change as far as table touching goes, until like there's a little bit, lesser rules and regs on everything. But I think every restaurateur opened a restaurant for the same exact reason you touched upon, about kind of letting people into their home to some extent. And I don't think that's ever going to change. I think even in a place that's a fast casual place, you still have some aspects of that. Like it might not be the whole wine and dine situation and being waited on at hand and foot, but you're being taken care of and let in. And I'm with you. I don't think any of that, the core aspects of what makes this industry great, is going to change.
Absolutely.
I think it's the details. I think that's
absolutely. I always tell people, people always have a great idea for a restaurant. And, even some of the customers that I deal with, like, what would be great? Mm-hmm. I think that steak should be, should have this type of sauce on it, to me, who's like their waiter. And I'm like, that's great. When you open your own restaurant, you can totally do that. And I'm a little shit to these customers, and they either love it or hate it. Yeah. And I don't get fired. But like little things, because I've gone to the point where it's like, that's great. Talk to the chef about it. Like, this is his house. This is the way he's making it. And you're ordering it the way it's read on the menu. If you don't like it, then I don't know what to tell you. Go home and make it yourself. Like, I'm sorry. This is like
that. The house thing is what I think more customers need to get in their heads. It's like when they walk in, this is my favorite, the entitlement of this one. You walk into a restaurant, there's already a full restaurant, or at least a semi-full restaurant. There's already people there.
Yeah.
And you walk in and you sit down and you go, you go to the host or the server or bring the manager over and they ask, can you turn the music down? Or can you turn the AC off? Can you turn the TV to a different
For the
station?
whole restaurant?
Like you're the only one here. Do you go to someone's like, can I walk in your house and say, can you move your couch to that corner? Like, get the fuck out of here, dude.
Totally. I hate that shit. I hope that we could do a whole other podcast about like restaurant etiquette, like in front of the house, back of the house.
I think I have to have one soon. A good fucking. So as we start to open back up and you start to see people like, everyone's all eager to get back to it. And they're all like, I'm going to tip like a rock star. And like, you're going to do it for like a month and then it's just going to be business as usual.
Absolutely.
All right, Sammy. I love you, man. I'm looking forward to the show.
I will keep you posted. Definitely. If you guys
where can
follow me?
Yeah, follow
I'm
me.
At Urban Res Society. That's Urban REZ, short for Reservation Society. I will put all of my posts moving forward about the show. It's probably going to happen the next couple months before the year's over.
Sure.
I'll start doing some social distancing type stuff and, hopefully get some stuff off the ground. I want to get a show sold by next year. So that's my goal.
I love the idea of aiming big, but start small. Just make a YouTube show and just proof of concept.
Definitely doing that. I've got that in the works and definitely aiming high as far as I can. So,
and if you ever need someone to test out recipes, give me a call.
Oh, it's not. I owe you and your wife a night of whining and dining.
Whining and dining.
Yeah, it's on.
All right. Well,
all right, buddy. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks, dude. Guys.
Had a good time.
Thanks again for listening to another episode of Corner, Memoirs of the Service Industry. Sammy, I love you. If you love Sammy as well, please give him a big thumbs up and hit the like button down below. If you're watching on YouTube, leave us a comment and subscribe. And if you're listening to us on a podcast, leave that a thumbs up and a rating and all that jazz. Until next time, guys, we'll talk to you later. Sammy, love you. Have a good one, my man. Bye.